Okay, everybody, welcome. How's everybody doing? Apologies, I am not there in person. I had some things come up at home and I have to be here, but I was really looking forward to being able to join you. This talk is on pizza making. If you're here in the room and you're not expecting that, I guess you're in the wrong spot. So accessible continuous integration, Stanford Drupal Camp. Little outline for you. I'm going to give a brief introduction, talk about continuous integration, look at current limitations, describe a future vision, introduce accessible continuous integration, review some case studies, and a call to action. Special shout out to Mr. Jeff Mahoney sitting in the crowd and my civic actioners who are trying to take care of me. Thank you. So who am I? Well, I am the Nerdstein. I go by Nerdstein, I go by Adam, whatever you want to call me. I'm the Associate Director of Engineering at Civic Actions. I've got a Master's of Science in Information Systems and Security, and I'm the Drupal 8 maintainer of many different modules: taxonomy menu, password policy, key, encrypt, field encrypt, services, many more. So before all of you go to happy hour, why don't we do a little bit of role playing? Let's start with Mr. Kenneth Parcell. You may look familiar, I don't know. He's an intern in the IT department. Kenneth is hardworking, very eager, super big team player, well-loved, but he's still learning IT. And he just happened to screw up the last 3 code releases that he was working on. His interests are knitting and kite flying. Mr. Ron Swanson. He runs the IT department. He's not technical whatsoever. He operates on a very low budget. He loves scotch, he eats lots of meat, and he actually hates IT. And we have Cruella DeVille. She is our client in IT. She's super non-technical. Honey badger to the core. She just doesn't give a, insert whatever word there. And she eats babies as a hobby. So continuous integration. What is it? Well, the Slack conversations between IT and Cruella, they're getting a little ugly right now. Cruella, your next Drupal release better work or I'm going to eat your babies. Ron says, team, go figure this out. I love scotch. Kenneth, now's my chance. I'm going to make this right. Guess what, folks? It's life or death. We have to save the babies. Kenneth stumbles on a concept called continuous integration, and he found an awesome quote that is meant to motivate the whole entire thing. Do not solve the same problem more than once. He loves it. So Kenneth begins to look up information about deployments on Drupal.org, and he finds that he can write a Drush script that can basically make his deployments automated. So he writes that up in a bash script and he runs it on all the servers. Kenneth presents this news to Ron. Ron, like a boss, responds, I was very close to firing you. So make sure the other engineers are able to do this. And pour me some more scotch. Kenneth searches for collaborative continuous integration tools to make sure that he can meet Ron's request. And he finds Jenkins, which is used for distributed builds, synchronizing continuous integration across teams. And so he uses Jenkins to integrate the bash script with the various servers in their environment, and he gives the other engineers access to Jenkins. DevOps automates solutions to long-standing continuous integration problems. So what is continuous integration? Well, we're going to apply continuous learning principles and we're going to solve problems. We're going to practically solve them. And the whole idea is if we have more consistency in how we work, that's going to equate to more predictability and more stability in how we operate. So it's promoting automation over someone who does something manually, which can be very error prone. And it shouldn't have any barriers. It should touch everything. So we should look at our release management. We should look at security scanning, log analysis, 508 compliance. automated testing, quality assurance, code reviews, and on-demand environments. What's the point? Well, the point is that you offer a better service to your users if you do continuous integration practices. But that's not quite why you're here. So what are the current limitations in how this works? Well, let's get back to our story. Kenneth runs the next deployment in Jenkins successfully. And he emails Ron and Cruella, hey, guess what? My deployment is completed. Go take a look. I actually got it to work. Cruella responds, I can't believe we're paying you to do this. Why can't I run deployments? And Ron responds, finally, freedom. Kenneth, get Cruella access to Jenkins. Kenneth provides Cruella access to Jenkins. And then guess what happens? Cruella sends an email to the entire organization. What kind of insane technical system is this? There's no way I'm using this. Do you think that I'm Steve Jobs? And Ron adds to the list of complaints that he receives across the board. Your security scan results are too long and illegible. I can't effectively test before my code is deployed. I have thousands of unread emails. Why do you keep emailing me? So what's the point? Well, the point is that innovation in technical automation is not enough. Why shouldn't Cruella have access? So thus far, DevOps and continuous integration really has only emphasized technical problems for technical audiences. And the way that it's marketed is basically saying, we're going to give you a better service if we do this. But it's time that we start evolving continuous integration beyond just something that's technical. We're really missing the people that we serve in the process. So we have a future vision for this. Innovation is not just about technical breakthroughs. So the problem is not the tools. It's that the tools are not approachable. So we need to open a dialogue with those that we serve. We need to build technical and social bridges for this to work out effectively. And in short, it's really called digital enablement, is the whole premise. So let's promote digital enablement just for continuous integration. Let's try to do that. So what does that look like? How might that work, or what could we do? Well, the first thing is that we need to emphasize the ease of adoption and removal of barriers to entry. We need to basically make sure that people are able to get into the tools and understand them. They're not super complex. We need to promote effective information sharing and transparency. In essence, if we're making the information readily available and that everyone can see what's going on, then they'll be more engaged and they'll be more informed. Driving towards usability of the services and the tools. So if the tools and everything that we do in continuous integration and DevOps promote usability, then they're easier to pick up. The learning curve is more shallow, and we're able to basically have things that are more readily available to people without extensive training or technical guidance, so on and so on. And really, we should just aim to deliver comprehensive and streamlined services. I don't think there's anything more frustrating than if something doesn't work completely, if things are really hard to use. So everything that we do with all the focus on this accessible continuous integration, we should try to make sure that they work well, right? So what we tried to do was boil this down into some really super high level goals, because I think as you're starting to think about this concept, it's really important for you to have some focus of some different goals that you might be aiming to solve. Well, the first goal is simple. So any process that you're automating or anything that you're setting up, any service, should be void of encumbrance. There shouldn't be anything hampering the service, or it should be really, really straightforward and super simple. Useful. Actually solve problems that people are desiring to solve. I know that seems really, really straightforward, but it's you have to do it, right? So the things that you are doing and the work that you're aiming to build, and those that you're aiming to enable, try to make sure that it's useful for them, right? I mean, get feedback from them as well and try to find out if it actually is. Flexibility. So technology changes. I hope everybody in the room understands that, that, what we do a year from now might not be what we're doing right now. So you should always aim to build things in a really flexible way. The solutions that you set up should be very robust. They should aim for long-term, unassuming functionality, as long as they are definitely flexible enough to handle it. But try to make sure that whatever solutions or whatever tools that you're adopting have flexibility in mind. I think that's super important. And transparent. So in everything that we do within accessible continuous integration, it should all be in promoting transparency. That's around communication, system messaging, and it should all be very concise and it should be frequent. So this information should not be, hidden from people. I think that's, really a very poor practice. And it should be legible and readable so that people can actually understand it. So our goal with accessible continuous integration is taking continuous integration to the masses. That's our objective. So what is accessible continuous integration? First, let's actually start by defining accessibility. Now, some of you might actually get confused with another accessibility, but hang tight. Accessibility, the definition of it on Wikipedia says, the process of creating products that are usable by people with the widest possible range of abilities, operating within the widest possible range of situations. Okay? So again, do not get confused by 508 compliance, which is also accessibility on the web. This is a different type of accessibility. There are current practices that build bridges. So what are they? Well, the first one is that abstracting technical details. The second is systems integration. The third is streamlined processes. And the fourth is platform and device agnostic. So these current practices really actually help to afford opportunities for building bridges to technical and non-technical people and the tools that are used. So let's take a look at each one of these. We'll start with abstracting technical details. So the obvious thing is the KISS concept. I can't see people in the room, but I hope that you've heard of that. But basically, KISS stands for Keep It Simple, Stupid. And the way that you can abstract technical details is by making sure that the systems and the tools are simple, right? That they actually are straightforward and they're easy to use. So the systems and everything that we work on, it must promote usability and it must account for technical literacy. I think often it's an afterthought that if we build these amazing continuous integration systems, that's going to be enough. But I don't think it's enough for our users. So what we should also aim to do is build really finely tuned user interfaces and not force our users to get into things like command lines, right? That's really taking them out of something that they're probably effective in and putting them into something a lot more technical in nature. And naturally, we should limit decision points, add help text, and promote consistency in user interface design. Limiting decision points is huge. I think that non-technical users, if they see a lot of different options or different parameters, and they don't quite understand what they're aimed to do, that can be very confusing. It could be frustrating if it doesn't work. And with continuous integration, it actually could be problematic. So they could be operating on different environments or running security scans or whatever, and that could be catastrophic. The next bullet is around integrating systems. For this whole strategy really to work, you really need a strong set of systems that promote interoperability. And that's also really good for future-proofing your continuous learning needs. If the systems can speak with one another and they can be integrated, then as you continue to learn and you continue to grow, what you'll find is you'll actually be able to enhance and evolve the systems in new and unique ways. But if you don't have any sort of interoperability, then it's pretty problematic. And what's really strong, in my view, about integrating systems is that if you are able to connect certain systems together, you don't have to force users to use multiple systems, and you don't have to force them to use very technical systems. You can put tools in their hands in tools in areas or in places that they are comfortable with, as long as you have a really strong interoperability strategy. And so what does that look like? Well, I've seen a lot of different ways that systems can work together. That could be through web services. It could be through APIs. A lot of tools like Jenkins and Slack have plugins. And anytime that you might build something or that you extend something that already exists, I would highly and strongly recommend, that you give it back to the communities and share it openly so that other people can benefit from it. But using those sets of tools are very commonplace for these systems to speak with one another. And we're going to have a couple case studies that we're going to look at coming up here that you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. The next part is end user involvement. And I think this is kind of really cliche right now, because I think continuous integration so far has only really been accessible for technical audiences. So this might be a bit taboo, but let's give it a shot. So how might you involve end users? Well, I think the first step is really identifying systems that users are comfortable using. And then once you have found the things that they're comfortable with, then you should work to try to enhance them within the things that you would like to extend for your continuous integration strategy. I think you should avoid forcing people to learn too much or to use new systems. I think that that's always been something very, very problematic for people. It's like, hey, why are you giving me this new thing? I don't understand it. I loved my 30-year-old system. It was wonderful. It worked flawlessly. There's often not a lot of motivation for people to try to learn new things or do new things, but the more that you're able to put the tools into their hands and what they're comfortable using, the more successful you're going to be. And I think this is probably the most important thing. So, really what needs to happen is we need to tear down the silos between technical discussions and discussions that serve our clients. We should encourage our users to be giving us feedback all of the time and participating in the continuous integration discussions. If that were to happen, then we would be much more aware of the problems that they're facing, and we could continually, using our continuous learning strategies, basically be aware and evolve things so with their needs as well, not just ours. So I think that's really important, is trying to have that sort of feedback loop that is readily available. And the last bullet is platform and device agnostic. So this is really crazy, right? Because if we would have had this slide a couple years ago, people probably would have really balked at it. But anymore, I mean, this is reality. Users want access everywhere and they want it immediately, right? They also want to avoid systems like email where communication can break down. Their phone is sending them push notifications from Facebook when their mother likes a picture that they post. So, they're used to that. They want that, right? And so these are really important things to be mindful of, because I think our end users are starting to change what they want. And so also, I think adopting best-of-breed solutions that don't restrict certain platforms is a really good way to make sure that you're not pigeonholing yourself down the road and you're not going to cause limitations that, hey, we can't work with iPhone users. We can only work with Android. Or, you have to use Internet Explorer. I'm sorry, you can't use Chrome. So we want to really try to make sure that whatever we're doing and the solutions that we're building, they're not restricting certain platforms, which would create really nasty limitations, I think, and probably just annoy people. And then lastly, systems should not only be available on desktops. Consider using mobile phones and tablets and, oh my God, refrigerators. Holy crap. Internet of Things. It's coming, folks. It's coming. I'm going to be watching the Final Four on my refrigerator later. No, that's a joke. So again, just please tear down the walls of continuous integration participation. I think, really your clients and those you serve just would love to kind of hear and be a part of it. At least make them feel more of the love, right? So why don't we take a look at a case study, and we're going to get back to our story. Okay, so when we left Kenneth was basically, behind a rock in a hard place, right? Where he needs to figure out how Cruella could be happy, right? Without using Jenkins, because it's too technical. So Kenneth read that Civic Actions integrated Slack and Jenkins. So what did he do? Well, he knew that Cruella already used Slack, because that's how he got, ribbed before, right? So what did Kenneth do? Kenneth built a command in Slack to perform releases. And in that command, it had instructions and it had different commands that were set up by environment. Kenneth quickly trained Cruella to run the deployment commands. And she was really comfortable with that because Cruella loved to run Giphy commands in Slack all the time. So she was very comfortable participating in this capacity. Well, guess what happened, folks? Cruella's heart grew 3 sizes that day. Amazing. Kenneth, as an intern, got a job offer after a glowing recommendation from Cruella. And Cruella went the extra mile and took Ron out for some scotch. A true partnership was formed. Accessible continuous integration in the wild. So let's take a look at 3 different case studies that we can do that promote accessible continuous integration. The first one is Slack and Jenkins. Slack and Jenkins is a happy and vibrant marriage. Slack is already highly intuitive for non-technical users. Okay, people are very comfortable using it. I think they're comfortable because it's got a nice interface. It has channels. I think people are already used to chat services on their phones and everything like that. So people are comfortable using it, right? So I mean, it's already usable and it's approachable. But what's really cool about Slack is that it supports these custom commands, and those commands can have help text. So Dan, who's sitting somewhere, hopefully in the room still, recently just connected, our deployment processes with Slack. So all of our team now can run deployments through Slack just by hopping in the channel. They could push some code and have it go right up to the different servers. So what are some different things to watch out for whenever you're trying to integrate Slack and Jenkins? Well, the first thing is that be aware that, if you abstract the different Jenkins parameters for the job, it's probably best to make them and split them out into separate commands because it's more straightforward. So if your Jenkins job has certain parameters, you might want them all to be separate commands, and then you run them parameterized through Slack. And this is super, super important. When you're running commands in Jenkins and you're outputting them back into Slack, you have the ability to customize that output, right? So if you're running a security scan and the output is thousands of pages of lines of completely technical garbly-gook, what you really should aim to do is actually pare that back and customize the output so that Slack gets a really concise and condensed set of messages that are relevant to people. So it definitely, I think, requires a little bit of work and some tuning and maybe a little bit of code in Jenkins. But the end result is that all the information that's reporting back from Jenkins is awesome, right? It's super useful and it makes all of the information very transparent and easy to understand. So please keep that in mind as you explore that. Just that, there's definitely best practices here, but just combining Slack and Jenkins is very, very awesome. The second item, which I think is already pretty well known thing in the Drupal community, is the concept of on-demand environments. So on-demand environments really help to improve quality assurance and client sign-off, and it's really vital for DevOps, in my opinion. Um, Folks like project managers and product owners, they need to be able to have, um, you know, code that's potentially going to be released. They need to be able to get that in their hands, but they don't have the ability to perform, their own local environments or set them up or to basically deploy it somewhere. So they really need the tools that can set up an environment with code that they're considering to roll into a release, to test it, and basically to make sure that it's meeting their needs. And what are some ways that we could do that now? Well, cloud hosting tools are really awesome for this sort of thing. And we have code repositories, right? So we have things like branches. And branches are a really good construct for when someone is working, a developer is working and they have a piece of code that they're ready to stage for testing or QA. So what's important here is basically that we should leverage our cloud hosting and connect it to each of these code branches and spin up these environments by branch. So I think that would be really important, for giving, the tools to the project managers and the product owners without merging the code into a releasable branch. And then what you could do, like, to really make this crazy is then you can integrate it as a Slack command. Say, hey, I want a new environment for this branch. And you produce a URL and you output a URL and you output credentials so that can be seen by anybody who wants to go in and perform QA or do client sign off. And let's face it, if that, all is happening all at once and you've empowered all of these non-technical people to be doing this work, you've basically really involved and engaged them in the process. So it's awesome. And most importantly, this actually simplifies release management. Why is that? Because your releases will never contain code that hasn't been tested or QA'd. So the code isn't merged into a release until that branch has been signed off. So it's really good for quality assurance and it makes everybody happy. The last item here, the last case study that we're going to look at today is around Jira, behavior-driven development, and code repositories. So BDD is all the rage right now, right? We've got like Behat and a bunch of other automated testing tools that basically are allowing automated tests to be written, in such a format that are really easy to understand, right? So we have this format could be basically written by anybody, right? It could be written by a product owner, or it could be written by, someone that works, in the business office. But basically, you don't have to be a programmer explicitly to leverage or write a Behat test. So how can we really make BDD sexy? Well, we can make everything else around it accessible. So our product owners use Jira. Well, that's a tool that we commonly use at Civic Actions, at least. And we could look at using repo hooks. So how does all of this come together? Well, Jira has plugin systems. So Jira has a plugin called Behave. And Behave can integrate directly in with a code repository. And that helps to establish an automated testing framework that can be written inside of Jira. And the really cool thing about that is that it empowers your users to write automated tests within Jira tickets. So what's awesome about that is that you don't have to get them to learn Git or get them to learn, how to integrate that somehow into your workflow. They can do it within the system that they're already comfortable and working in. So it's awesome. I strongly recommend you look at that. And then how do we really, really streamline this? How do we make this super awesome? Well, we're going to leverage hooks inside of your code repositories to run these automated tests whenever developers submit pull requests. So anytime there's code that's ready to go into a branch, what we're going to do is we're going to run all of the automated tests, and we're going to tell the developer, hey, your code failed or your code passed. And if it failed, here's a list of reasons why. And that could hook in with Jenkins, or that could hook in, if you're using GitHub, with something like Travis CI, which basically gives you a framework for invoking the hooks to basically fire off these automated tests with the new code. So what have you done if you set something like this up? Well, the first thing is that the feedback loop that you have set up here is drastically shortened, because your user needs are the things that are being written into tests. When the code is produced, that test is going to be run against the developer's code, and the developer doesn't ever have to go and interact with another human being, which sometimes they like, without getting feedback on the work that they've done. So really, it's awesome, right? You can get immediate feedback loops that actually have your users' feedback in mind. It has what they want. And then it's also very clear that if they didn't define what they want, if the requirements weren't clear or anything like that, it's clear that they didn't specify it, right? So you can go back and say, hey, maybe this should be a new ticket. It really makes things a lot more straightforward and a lot easier. So this is a call to action. Accessible continuous integration is not a technology per se, it's a mindset. Unlock the potential, empower your users, and push for accessible continuous integration. Thank you, Stanford. Sorry I couldn't be there. I will miss all of you at happy hour, and I promise I will make it next year. I will take questions